Hi kids. Okay, last video in this series, and it's Schindler's List. So we'll get right into it. So Schindler's List, obviously based on real events. All of these films to some degree contain elements of real events, some more than others. So Schindler's List is, the film is largely came to creation because of one man who was a Holocaust survivor. His name was Poldek Pfefferberg. He was born in what at the time was Austria-Hungary, became a teacher, and then Germany invades Poland. He joins the Polish army. He fights in the war. He is injured. His sergeant major drags him back to a hospital. He recovers, and then he has to decide whether or not he wants to go west towards Germany or east towards the Soviets. So he decides to go east towards the Soviets. He later remarks that if he would have gone west, he probably would have been machine gunned to death by the Germans. So he goes east, and he finds his way to Oscar Schindler's factory, where his mother is. His mother was an interior designer who, just prior to the war, was working for Oscar Schindler as an interior designer. So she gets employment in the factory for Oscar Schindler, and so does Pfefferberg himself. And because of that, the two of them survive the war, while many people do not and are exterminated in the Holocaust. Pfefferberg and his mother survive. The rest of their family are not so fortunate. So after the war, Pfefferberg immigrates to the States, ends up in LA, goes by the name Leopold Page, and he runs a luggage store. And he thinks that somebody should tell the story of Oscar Schindler, the man who saved so many people. And then Schindler dies in 1974, and that just motivates Leopold Page even more. Somebody has to tell this story. Schindler needs to be remembered. And he's trying to tell it to anyone he can to get this story told. So around 1982, a novelist named Thomas Keanly ends up in his shop, and he tells him the story. He shows him the documents and stuff that he has, and he agrees to write the novel. So Thomas Keanly is an Australian novelist. So he writes it. It's published as Schindler's Ark because Leopold viewed Oscar Schindler as like Noah, saving all of these Jewish people. So it gets published, and then Leopold has some acquaintances who are friends with Steven Spielberg's mother. So through those contacts, he gets the phone number for Spielberg's office, and he says that he calls Spielberg's office every day for 11 years, trying to convince him to adapt Schindler's Ark. Spielberg, of course, eventually does. He says that it took him 11 years because he wasn't yet ready to tell the story. He didn't feel like he could properly, wasn't mature enough, wasn't ready, wasn't experienced enough. But of course, eventually, Spielberg makes Schindler's List. It's released in 93, originally released December 15th, 1993. It is 93 is called Spielberg's big year. I mean, there's a lot of years you could say is Spielberg's big year, but 93, Schindler's List comes out in December, and Jurassic Park, I believe, came out in June of the same year. So Spielberg, in order to get financing for Schindler's List, he has to make Jurassic Park. It's not like he doesn't want to make Jurassic Park, but that's the deal. He makes Jurassic Park first because he knows if he makes Schindler's List, he probably won't feel like making Jurassic Park. So makes Jurassic Park, and then goes to location for filming Schindler's List. Not on location out of respect for the actual sites. It's more adjacent to the actual sites that they're filming. But while he's filming Schindler's List, in his trailer at night, he's also corresponding back in LA with post-production for Jurassic Park. So he's working around the clock. And filming Schindler's List is also emotionally draining. He says most days he's crying on set. It's hard to get through. It's a tough task. So, to cheer himself up, he watches episodes of Seinfeld. Seinfeld later watches Schindler's List. Maybe he was necking during Schindler's List. A more offensive spectacle. Cannot recall. Watching Seinfeld and gets phone calls, cheer him up from his friend Robin Williams. The two of them, prior to Jurassic Park, just made Hook together. So Robin Williams, at around the time, is doing his voiceover work for Aladdin. So a lot of the material that's in Aladdin, he's testing it out on Spielberg. Filming Schindler's List, he films it in black and white because he wants it to feel timeless. And he casts mostly unknowns, not big names anyways, much like in my Jaws video. What Spielberg occasionally, if you look at his filmography, decides to do is not to cast the big stars in the roles. Like in Jaws, he wanted people more to focus on the characters. Schindler's List, he didn't want you to see Harrison Ford as Oscar Schindler and be thinking, oh, there's Indiana Jones, or there's Han Solo, or there's Harrison Ford. He wanted you to just see Oscar Schindler. So Liam Neeson gets cast, Ralph Fiennes gets cast. At the time, they were not Liam Neeson and Ralph Fiennes that they are today, right? Liam Neeson had not yet acquired his specific set of skills. He was not yet in a Star Wars. Ralph Fiennes was not yet in a Harry Potter. So the two of them are cast, filmed in black and white, and the film had about a $22 million budget, which is around double the last film that I talked about, Patton, but Patton was, 23 years before this. If you look at the budget of Schindler's List compared to Jurassic Park, it's a very, very, very small. So it's Spielberg's big year. Jurassic Park comes out in June. Jurassic Park becomes the highest grossing film of all time, which is notable for Spielberg's big year because if you look at the history of highest grossing films of all time, I'll give you just a quick rundown. So it goes 1915, Birth of a Nation. That's the highest grossing film until about 1940 when Gone with the Wind comes out. And then that's the highest grossing film, I think, until Sound of Music. And then The Godfather. And then Jaws comes out, right? Birth of the Summer Blockbuster. Invents that. Highest grossing film of all time. 2 years later, Star Wars defeats it. Highest grossing film of all time. And then in 82, Spielberg has another big year. Poltergeist, which he didn't direct, and E.T. comes out, E.T. becomes the highest grossing film of all time. So now he's the first director to direct two films that have been the highest grossing film of all time. E.T. stays the highest grossing film of all time until Jurassic Park. So then he beats his own records, and now 3 times Spielberg has directed the highest grossing film of all time. That's why I mentioned in the Jaws video that Spielberg invents the blockbuster. He is the guy that keeps perfecting it, right? It's the highest grossing film of all time until James Cameron's Titanic and then Avatar. So Cameron is pretty much replicating what Spielberg's done, and now all of the films have to be blockbusters all the time. So, anyways, and yes, Harrison Ford was considered for Oscar Schindler. Schindler's List wins Best Picture. Spielberg accepts the award. Harrison Ford is handing it out. Instead of being in Schindler's List, Harrison Ford is in The Fugitive. The Fugitive was also up for Best Picture that year. So Harrison Ford is handing out the award, and The Fugitive doesn't win, but Schindler's List does, and he gets to give it to his friend, Steven Spielberg. Spielberg also that year wins his first Best Directing Academy Award. He would go on to win another one and make another war movie, but that's not on this list because it did not win Best Picture because of Oscar campaigning. So yeah, that's about it for Schindler's List. Tomorrow is Remembrance Day, so take a moment to reflect, lest we forget the Holocaust. It's very important. Antisemitism is not okay, so don't forget. Radio silence for Remembrance Day, and then I'll be back with a new series, which is a spin-off of sorts of this one, talking about the Oscars a lot. So I am going to go through the history of the Oscars. The 95th Academy Awards, I think, are March 12th or 14th. So I'm going to go through every single Oscars leading up to then, go over the ceremonies, go over the changes through the years, highlight how some of the things that we perceive now as being different or drastic or changes have kind of always been that way. The ceremony, the awards have always changed. There's always been controversy. It's always been the battle of which film should be recognized as the best. So I'll go over that. As we get closer, we'll talk about the nominees for this year, and I'll tell you how you can, without even watching them, pick who's going to win all the awards, all 24 of them. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Anyways, AFI list. The 98 list, Schindler's List was number 9 on the list. Remember that this came out in 93, so that's only 5 years after. AFI lists are usually films from the 40s that we've talked about on this list. And Spielberg obviously is heavily influenced by all the people that we've talked about. Your William Wyler's, the director David Lean, he's a big fan of Lawrence of Arabia. So anyways, 98, it's number 9, and then in 2007 it's voted number 8. Schindler's List. Thank you for watching. Hit like, hit subscribe, tell all your friends. Thanks.